on the One Network.
Before we get very far into our next story, we do have a warning for you tonight. What you're about to see and hear may not be suitable for children. Tonight, take a walk in their world.
Transpicuous News, connecting the dots between the lines.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Transpicuous News on December 16th, 2014. The silly season is upon us, and this week it got quite silly. I have a lot of stuff to share with you guys this week, from outrageous, hysterically slapstick funny to make you scream in frustration, and no doubt a couple of face palms in there as well. I hope you have a coffee and a comfy seat. We're going to get going, okay? If you were following along, we had another terrorist attack. This one took place in Sydney, Australia. I followed this because of time zone changeovers. I didn't actually become aware of this until it was into its 11th hour. The news coverage was unbelievably funny. They couldn't get any details straight, from the number of terrorists to the number of hostages. It was quite funny. I put out an article yesterday on removing the shackles. I reposted an article that someone had written called Cut to the Truth, who outlines just the ridiculousness of this false flag attack, because this was definitely a staged event. I'm not going to get into the details. Have a look. I'll post the link down below. Yeah, some of the stuff in here was rather funny. Now, here comes the frustration. There are times when I hate being right. Back in August, when I wrote my first set of Ebola articles, and when I did the first Ebola special here on Transpicuous News, I talked about the fact that one of the avenues I believed they were going to go down was to go into a blood serum vaccine. And in the video, I explained quite in depth the idiocy behind it. Well, guess what? Hit the news this week. Ebola serum supply reaches Liberia. Not only that, at the very bottom of the article, it says that making these treatments, well, basically explanation for those who didn't watch the Ebola special, a blood serum vaccine is when they take the blood of someone who has recovered from the illness, and they basically make a serum out of it and inject it into another person. Sounds brilliant, right? This is how smallpox vaccine was generated. This is how they spread smallpox to millions of people around the world, regardless of what mainstream wants you to know. At the bottom of this article, they actually state that they've been using serum vaccines in US hospitals. So I'm going to give you a little idea. So let's say you come from West Africa and you happen to arrive in the States and you get sick. You either get really bad case of the flu, or even dengue, or malaria, typhoid. And you show up at the hospital presenting with symptoms, and they go, "Oh, you have Ebola. Here, have this serum vaccine. Look, and now you do have Ebola." Isn't that fun? So I'm really pissed about this because I didn't want to be right, and I was. I will also state the fact that they've gone to a serum vaccine tells us that they're definitely having a problem with going with the mainstream vaccines. Either they can't get the derivatives market set up for it, or they can't get the proper funding because there's no money to run with a serial vaccine. Now, here's the thing. We have 5 different countries working on supposedly an Ebola vaccine. US, Canada, Russia, China, and I believe the 5th one is Belgium. And the fact that none of them have pushed this through yet is a very big indicator of the financial side of all of this is just not working. Next story. This is an old one. This is a really important, this came across my desk yesterday. This is a piece of information that is vitally important that people talk about and spread. Okay. The Lancet is one of the most well-respected medical journals in the world. So people can't argue that this is, it's not mainstream. This is as mainstream as you can get. March 2014 was a study on neurobehavioral effects of developmental toxicity. They're talking about neurotoxins, the type of things that can trigger autism, ADD, dyslexia. Okay. The article runs through a few things, and the most important part of this is that in 2006, since 2006, pardon me, they added 6 additional developmental neurotoxicants to the list. The second one on the list is fluoride. Okay, this is a piece of information that we need to get out into the alternative media. We need to get it out on social networking. People need to understand fluoride is toxic. It's not just toxic for your body, it's toxic for your brain. We have schools in the States that are adding fluoride to their milk. Okay, this is something that needs to go viral, so I'm asking everyone, do a little research, spread this out. The link is down below. And again, in medical, this is good. A little bit of truth. We have drug maker Genentech is being charged, well, not charged, let's say, the finger's being pointed at them for paying doctors to prescribe their drug. Isn't that funny how that works? You can pay a doctor to prescribe your drug. The original drug that these doctors were using was $50 a dose. And then Genentech came up with a new one that's $2,000 a dose. And they're paying the doctors to prescribe the $2,000 a dose medication, even though it doesn't work any better than the $50 a dose medication. So I just like that one. I love to point fingers at Big Pharma when I can. This is in the realms of hilarity. I giggled for an entire day after reading this. First commercial lunar mission sends sand from a favorite beach or your family picture to the moon. Yes, a U.S. firm billing itself as the FedEx or UPS to the moon has launched moon mail delivery services that enable customers to send personal keepsakes to the moon for a mere $460, and you don't need a return address. Yep, you can send your picture of your family to the moon, where it can stay there. And I don't know, they're going to make a big landfill site there, I guess. It's quite humorous. Anyways, the whole article was just patently ridiculous. I giggled and giggled and giggled, so I had to share it with you guys. Another one, I laughed. Actually, the first article that I read, real life, Eye of Sauron will be opening over Moscow in a skyscraper for the last Hobbit movie being released. And I read that and I was just like, are you crazy? Do they have any idea, like, kind of the connotations with the Eye of Sauron? Well, apparently they do, because no, they didn't actually go ahead, because strangely enough, the Orthodox Church was like, yeah, no, we're not putting like a demon eye over the city. Can't imagine who came up with this ridiculous idea. I thought it was funny though. Denmark to officially claim a piece of the Arctic shelf, including the North Pole. Now this is funny because since November of 2013, there have been regular articles coming out, just little ones, talking about Canada, Russia, and Denmark are having a race to the North Pole. Not just to the North Pole, but mapping, because they're all trying to decide who actually owns the North Pole. So Denmark is apparently going to file a claim with the UN. It's going to be interesting because I don't think Russia and Canada are going to be sitting down and taking it lightly. They want the North Pole too. Although, we have to ask, what is there at the North Pole that these guys are really interested in? Inquiring minds want to know. This is funny because kind of the idiocy that they're playing in the story, because if it's true, oh my goodness. Okay, 1795 time capsule found in Boston Capitol. Apparently this time capsule was buried in 1795 by Paul Revere and Samuel Adams. The funny part of this is, first off, is it was unburied in 1855 when they were doing some fixing up and they discovered it. They, oh, look, a time capsule. And they fixed up the corner that's drawn into the building and they put the time capsule back in. And apparently they just totally forgot all about it again and rediscovered it when they were fixing a water leak. Oh, look, here's time capsule. So I find it very, very funny that something that you would think would be kind of as big as Paul Revere planting a time capsule has slipped notice. The funny part is that in October, there was another time capsule found in Boston. And apparently no one knew about this one either, even though it was apparently very well publicized in the news when it was made. Bostonian Society said its current staff was unaware of the time capsule until they received a letter from a descendant of Rogers, the gentleman who built the statue, alerting them to it. Now, 2 time capsules, both in Boston, found within 2 months of each other. I don't know, it kind of stretches my disbelief meter and says, I think there could be something more to this story that we don't know about. We'll just keep an eye on this. And of course, we all know that I can't help myself. I love to make fun of the banks when they get fined. So 10 major US banks are fined again, this time $45 million, over basically faking research for the Toys R Us IPO. Yes, so 10 major banks got fined $43 million. And again, it all comes down to, we all know that the fines actually mean nothing, but I do find it a giggle. This is such a giggle. This was sent to me by my girlfriend Moosh, who is Maltese. This is out of the Maltese Times. The Vatican fines hundreds of millions of euros. Shh. Sorry, that's my dog adding her incredulity to this whole entire story too. Vatican finds hundreds of millions of euros tucked away in hidden bank accounts. In an article for the British Catholic Herald magazine to be published tomorrow, Australian Cardinal wrote that the discovery meant the overall Vatican finances were in better shape than they previously thought. In fact, we have discovered that the situation is much healthier than it seemed, because some hundreds of millions of euros were tucked away in sectional accounts that didn't appear on the balance sheet. They just found hidden accounts with hundreds of millions of euros in them. Now, I don't know about you, but when I put on a jacket and I stick my hand in the pocket and I go, oh, look, I found $5. I'm thrilled. $5. I would really love to find an account that had hundreds of millions of euros hidden away. Next article is Vatican II. This is one of the biggest pieces of transparency I have ever seen in mainstream news. U.S. asks Vatican help to close Guantanamo Bay. I want you to note the wording. President Barack Obama's goal of closing Guantanamo Bay prison complex in Cuba has met heavy resistance from lawmakers in Washington, and now the White House is turning to a higher authority for help, the Vatican. Now, considering that, to the best of my knowledge, there's very few Catholics in the White House. President Obama is definitely not Catholic. They obviously aren't referring to a spiritual higher authority. That, my friends, right there, a higher authority, is one of the biggest pieces of transparency ever put out in mainstream news. Was just about fell off the couch when I read that one. I'm really impressed. We're going to go on, though. We all know how much I love CNN. One of their economists wrote this article, told students, you want to get rich? Don't pay off your student loan. Invest in the stock market. It's a great idea, isn't it? And it's even better because, look, New York is awarding the first Vegas-style casino licenses this week. So you could play the stock market and roulette at the same time. Because you pretty much are going to lose either way. Oh, I just giggled over that article. So I was talking about last week the Japanese elections. Just days before the Japanese election, Prime Minister Abe granted a law, or put in place a very unpopular law that granted the Japanese government wider powers to declare state secrets, which is another way of controlling the media. And 4 days later, Abe won the election in Japan with historically the lowest record of voter turnout ever in Japan. And yeah, he's moving forward with all his Abenomics, and I don't know what these people were thinking. Well, we do. We all know that elections don't mean anything, right? Whoever's going to win is the person they say is going to win. It has nothing to do with who anyone votes for. Two stories, both major, but there's a piece missing that a lot of people don't understand. So number one, the first one, Bush misled the nation in the run-up to the Iraq War. Okay, retiring Senator Carl Levin stated there was a concerted campaign on part of the Bush administration to connect Iraq in the public mind with the horror of the September 11th attacks. And he said, of course, connections between Saddam Hussein and 9/11 and Al-Qaeda were fiction. Right there. The entire Iraqi war was a farce. And publicly stated now, and this is, again, mainstream media. Next one, of course, the CIA puts out their big report about torture. And immediately everyone loses their minds because they didn't expect this. I don't know. What's humorous is we have Cheney defending the CIA torture, says, I do it all again. And he calls the interrogators heroes. And then he points a finger at Bush and says, and Bush fully knew about the whole thing. And the look on Bush's face kind of says it all. So here's what I want to talk about. Both these articles came out within days of each other. And there was a hue and cry across social media, the alternative media, social networks, people screaming, they should be taken to The Hague, International Criminal Court, they should all be brought up on charges, blah, 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 blah. So we need to clear the air on this. This is a major thing that is, I can't believe how many people just don't get, okay? The International Criminal Courts, the Courts of Justice in The Hague, okay? People don't understand what their jurisdiction is. This is important. Being a party to the statute does not automatically give the court jurisdiction over disputes involving those parties. The ICJ has jurisdiction only on the basis of consent. Very important to note. Okay, farther down and this is a real big one, the United States had previously accepted the court's compulsory jurisdiction upon its creation in 1946. But in the Nicaragua versus United States withdrew its acceptance following the court's judgment in 1984 that called on the U.S. to cease and refrain from unlawful use of force against the government of Nicaragua. And at that point, the U.S. government said, screw you, we're going home, we're not playing in your game anymore, and there's nothing you can do about it because we don't consent. Now, down below, I have a homework assignment for everyone because it's been long enough now that a lot of people have forgotten about the Iran-Contra affair, and I have some links down below because you may want to review some of the information of what actually happened during this. I think it'll shock a few people, especially the younger generations who really don't have any understanding of what really went on there. Okay, but it's very important to note, because of that, the U.S. walked out of the International Court of Justice jurisdiction, and they do not play. So much so that in 2002, the U.S. created a law called the Hague Invasion Act that protects U.S. service members from the International Criminal Courts. 2002. Oh, would that be right before they went into Iraq? Oh, look at that. So the next time someone tries to tell you, especially in the intel world, I do love when all these people say, oh, Obama's going to be brought before the world courts, and Bush and Cheney and the CIA, and we're going to take them, and these American corporations like the big banks are going to be filed for bankruptcy in the world courts. Yeah, okay. If anyone makes those statements, they have no idea what they're talking about. So please remember, Hague, USA, The Hague has no control to investigate, fine, penalize, arrest anyone who's in the United States government, workers, military, even corporations. So that's just a lesson for today. Like I said, go read up the stuff on the Iran-Contra stuff, though. Interesting stuff in there. Unfortunately, pardon me for the big gray square. When I captured the screenshot, the video flickered. That's what it is. What it is. All over the news, and I always talk about the fact that when you see something go viral over the news and they're really pushing things, I always go, why is that? Navy has a new laser weapon, and for 2 weeks, that's all the news has talked about. They're shooting down drones. They can do this. Oh, look, we have our little laser. It's so cool. Really pushing this out. So you gotta wonder, why all this propaganda? Could it be because of this article that came out in November? Now, this wasn't carried by mainstream media, not even slightly, but it went viral through the alternative media. And this is the story of the USS Donald Cook in the Black Sea. And there it was, looking all big and tough. And all of a sudden, a Russian fighter jet flew overhead. No weapons on it, no missiles, no bombs. Interesting little dome on the bottom, though. And when it did a flyby over the ship went dead in the water. All systems fail. You might as well have been sitting in a rowboat. And to make matters worse, the Russian jet flew by 10, 12 times. Scared the bejesus out of them all so badly that once the Donald Cook limped back into port, 28 members of the crew asked for immediate leave and transfers off the ship. So this was a pretty embarrassing thing to happen. You know, this is a fancy-dancy U.S. warship got shut down by what is most likely an EMP. So is this the whole laser thing? Is they trying to, it's bully boy tactics? Like, no, look, we're tough, Look what we got, new toys, just in time for Christmas. In the financial news, Greece, and there's a couple of things that they're just not talking about very much at the moment. One of the ones here, The Greek stock exchange, biggest drop since 1987. This was based on the fact that they, like Sweden and Japan, have called a snap election because of the financial situation they're in. And yeah, it's really, really bad. Greece's bonds are up again, and they are looking at a default. So is Portugal. And no one is talking about it. I'm not sure why. What could they be hiding? This was very interesting. Tyler at Zero Hedge ran with this within minutes of this announcement being made. What do they know? The CME implements gold precious metal circuit breakers. Here we go. Let me read this. They're going to seek a 5-minute trading halt when a price movements in futures contracts results in a triggering event. So in other words, when all of a sudden there's a big, what they call a fat finger trade, and all of a sudden, really fast, trading halt for 5 minutes so they can stop, go back and analyze the information. So Tyler asks, one wonders why now? What does the CME know about upcoming volatility or lack of liquidity in the precious metals market? I found down below something even more interesting about the halts. However, no further special price fluctuation limits will be implemented following a trading day's 4th price fluctuation limit adjustment, which means if they have to stop the floor 4 times in the day, on the 5th time, they don't stop the floor. They just say, oh, we just keep going. So all it really takes is for someone to go boop, 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 knowing that on the 5th one, they're not going to halt the floor. And then you can push your trade through and know that they won't halt it and they won't question it because it might be just viewed as a glitch. Interesting timing, considering everything else going on in the gold realms at the moment. Right, so now we're going to talk about oil. Oil is the big news right now in the financial market because the price is falling radically. There's a lot more to this than is what being perpetuated by the mainstream media and the economists and all the rest of it. Now, yesterday, the United Arab Emirates stated that OPEC is not going to change its output, or how much oil it's going to put out, even if oil drops to $40 a barrel. As of this morning, I believe the price is at $54 a barrel. This is a major power play going on right now. Okay? Oil producing currencies, so countries that are major oil producers, are having collapses right now in their currencies. But it's interesting if you look at who the hardest hit countries are. Brazil, Russia, India, Indonesia. Isn't that interesting? All BRICS nations, literally BRICS nations. Nigeria and Venezuela, also on the US hit list. Major propaganda, been ongoing against both countries for a long time. Mexico and Canada. Interesting that Canada just signed a major trade deal with China, doing a currency exchange directly in yuan. No greenbacks. Same with Mexico and Venezuela and Brazil and Russia, India and Indonesia, and so the list goes on and on. These are all major Chinese trade partners. It's kind of interesting when you look at it. Now, the other interesting part of this is what happened the last time oil did what it's doing right now. That happened in the second half of 2008, right before the financial crash. Keep that in mind. Well, the other thing that's going on right now, the European Central Bank is just gone nuts with buying the asset-backed bond sales, going back to pre-2007 levels of buying debt, because, you know, debt is such a great idea. What's another thing going on? Oh, look at this. If at first you fail miserably and blow up the financial system, do it again. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have now just officially approved 3% down payments on mortgages for first-time homeowners, exactly like they did before the crash of 2008. Isn't that interesting? Interesting information. Now we're going to go to the next big story. This was the biggest and one of the most important pieces of this last week and a half. The U.S. fiscal budget for 2015. And if you followed it in the mainstream media, it was a circus, as we expected. What's interesting is just before the Thursday deadline on the 11th, they slipped another little piece into the bill. And it started a shitstorm. Basically, the big banks, Wall Street, went in and said, look, this is what we want done. We want you to remove certain sections of the Dodd-Frank Act, which were put in place in 2010, so that the financial crash couldn't happen again. No more of these big bank bailouts. Ooh, no more big bank bailouts. Wonder why they need to worry about that. Now, in the bill, in the budget, because like I said, 1,600 pages, oh, kind of like the defense budget, 1,600 pages. You guarantee none of them read the budget here for this one either. CNN, my favorite, runs through a list of some of the changes that are in this budget this year. Now, I've copied and pasted it because it was extremely long, but this is literally the order they ran in, blocking new marijuana legislation bill in Washington, D.C. Wealthy donors allowed to give more to political parties, which is such a crock of shit. Sorry. More wheat bread for school lunches. The sage grouse faces uncertain future. More taxpayer money for expensive portraits. Sorry, no more taxpayer money for expensive portraits. Old-fashioned light bulbs will still be allowed. White potatoes get top billing. Truckers won't be required to get more sleep. Farmers get a reprieve from some clean water rules. Gitmo prisoners can't come to the United States. And banks allowed to use taxpayer money to engage in potentially risky trades. What the hell? Yes, goes on to say, the bill rolls back a provision that was part of the financial reforms for Wall Street banks, the Dodd-Frank Act. It reverses a rule that was enacted in 2010 that barred banks from using taxpayer-backed funds from trading in derivatives. Let's do a little flashback. This is really important. If you will remember, a few weeks ago, I covered this story. Cash under the mattress may be better than a G20 bank. And it outlined the fact that the bank deposits are just going to be part of commercial banks' capital structure, and that the bank deposit is no longer money in the way that a banknote is. Large deposited banks are no longer money. They will be part of the security or the capital structure. Well, now I actually tried to embed a little piece of video where I commented on this. It didn't come out very clearly. So I'm going to put the link below. I'll give you, it's about a 31-minute mark of the video. And I said what was going to happen because it all went silent after this. So what we're going to see is, as I said, they pulled it back. They watched carefully. They analyzed what the reaction was. And you spin doctor it and you roll it out again. What we're seeing right now is a direct result. This is the same thing. Different words, kind of put in play a little differently, but it is the exact same thing. That your deposits, if the banks go belly up, are no longer yours. Banks go belly up. What was that? oil, ECB bond sales, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I wonder, does it sound like they're gearing up for another financial collapse? Because it sure as hell does to me. This sounds very much like a planned financial collapse. They passed the bill through much arguing and debating. $1.1 trillion spending bill. Wall Street won. They got their little piece in there so that they can get their big bailouts when everything collapses again. My question is, and is there an economist in the house? Because I'd like an answer on this one. They pass a $1.1 trillion spending bill. Yet, as we covered last week, between October 1st and November 27th, the Treasury had already issued $1 trillion in new debt just to pay the old debts and to keep the government run. And there's the $585 billion defense spending bill. So $1 trillion already spent plus $585 billion, that already puts them over the $1.1 trillion. So can anyone explain to me how it is that these budgets even remotely mean anything? Because let's face it, obviously they don't. Now, the one last thing I want to talk about. I did the gold special last week, and I had a lot of people ask me a lot of questions. Strangely enough, right after I did the gold special, there's been a bunch of articles come out about silver and China. And a lot of people are asking me what I think is going to happen. And they say, well, you keep saying, look at China and watch the gold and watch China. Right. So what I see is the Chinese power play is they are about to go and launch their own gold-backed currency. Pardon me. And there are people who would argue and say, oh, China doesn't have the gold to be able to do that. Okay, let me lay out some facts for you. Do you know who the #1 gold mining country in the world is? It's China. China does not export any of the gold that they mine. Now, China's #1 in producing, and Australia's #2. And China is on the books producing almost twice as much gold a year than Australia is in the #2 position. And they're not exporting it. That means that it's somewhere. Where is it? I tell you, I almost guarantee that it's in one of those nice big vaults. China is moving forward. Now, the big thing I want people to be aware of is this is, as I keep talking about, just the same girl in a different party dress. Whether you have Texas Camp, or you have your Vatican Rothschilds, or you have China, it's all the same thing. And whether people want to see it or not, it's all being run by the same people. It's all the same agenda in the end of it all. So what we're going to see is basically a rephoenixing of the system. That's their plan. And if you're watching the alternative media, you're seeing the power plays between the various factions trying to get their plan in place. And you have like the oil stuff that's going on, trying to pull down the BRICS nations. And you have the various stunts that have been going on in everywhere with currencies, with the Forex, with the stock markets. And you have China over here. China, as I wrote in the silver article I just did last week, they don't think the way we think. They think in dynasties. They have a proven track record of doing things and planning for things 100 years in advance, not a decade, not next year, but 100 years. So what I see playing out right now is just a changing of the guard. It doesn't mean that anything is going to change, except that it'll all be the same, just a different party dress on it. Now, there are a lot of people out there who would argue with me and talk about dragon families, etc., etc. And you know what? Great. If they're out there and they're going to make a big change and they're going to step in and make this all rose-colored glasses and flowers and unicorns and rainbows, awesome. But from where I sit right now, the vast majority of the information I'm seeing brought out by these assorted, ambassadors to dragon families and intel sources and all of this stuff, it all smacks of propaganda. Whether it's the Nasara Patriot stuff that's going on over here, whether it's dragon family stuff over there, Jesuit Vatican stuff, it all smacks of propaganda, and it all comes from one faction or another trying to push their agenda. I don't think it's going to make a lick of difference in the end run. Here's the thing, though. From everything that I can see and everything that I'm feeling and getting from, whether you want to call it my own head, consciousness, etc., it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's all coming down. Any one of these financial systems that comes into play, it's not going to last long because it's all based on fraud. Whether it's gold-backed or not gold-backed, whether it's being run through the Jesuit camp, it doesn't matter. It's all based on fraud. And none of that fraud is standing anymore. It's all being made very, very transparent. The White House going for help from a higher authority. These things are coming out. And more people are outing themselves and their agendas, and the people are waking up and they're seeing it. So, in my personal opinion, it doesn't matter who comes through. It doesn't matter which of these financial systems comes online. They're all going to fall anyways. They're just going to crash. What happens after then is going to be very interesting to watch, because I am keenly positive that there are those in the background who are just waiting for the whole fall down so that then they can move in and reset things up. Perhaps the way they should be. Anyways, everyone, that was my very long-winded Transpicuous News for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Side note, it is the silly season. I have 4 children and I'm not even remotely prepared. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I don't think there'll be a Transpicuous News next week. Or if there is, it's very, very small. Just the major stories. I hope everyone has an awesome couple of weeks. Enjoy family and friends and love and festivities. And I will see you when I come back. Bye.
Before we get very far into our next story, we do have a warning for you tonight. What you're about to see and hear may not be suitable for children. Tonight, take a walk in their world.
Transpicuous News, connecting the dots between the lines.